So, okay, let's dive in. Let's dive in. And so, Tihomir Kukolja is uh, a theologian, a communicator, a journalist. Um, he was born in Croatia, 1954, lived and worked in Yugoslavia, Croatia, United Kingdom, Australia, and in the US. In fact, right now he's based in Houston, Texas. And his focus has been on religious liberty and also on peace building in the post Croatian War context, particularly in Croatia, and also leadership development. I had the amazing benefit of participating in one of Tihomir's amazing programs that he did called Renewing Our Minds, that he started in Croatia. And at first it was for Croatians, and then it actually branched out. And before you knew it, literally folks from all over the world were coming to ROM. I think it was like a 4-week quote conference. We don't call those things conferences in America. We call them vacations, or we call them
No,
a whole month, basically.
neither
But
conference, neither vacation.
but it actually, in a lot of ways, it was like a training retreat.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the way to put it. It was like a 1-month training retreat. It was amazing. And I learned a lot there. And there are generations of people who actually learn so much about what is reconciliation and what does it require of us, and what is peace and what does it require of us. And so, Tihomir has been someone that I have I've had as a touchstone in my life over the last several years, especially as we have seen the rise of authoritarianism in the United States. And if you recall, if you're with us and watching and were a part of the kitchen table conversations when they were on Instagram, you recall he was a guest on that program. And so I am so proud today to have him back here on Substack, because this is actually the very first time that we are doing the kitchen table conversations since 2022. We are resurrecting the kitchen table conversations for Substack. So, y'all, we are going to be having these conversations at my kitchen table every Friday. So every Friday, um, the time is still to be determined, and will be determined in the next week. It'll be starting. They'll actually be starting in September, because we're not going to be here during the Labor Day weekend. But we're going to be coming together every Friday in order to have these critical conversations about what's going on in our world. Now, what you may be thinking about right now, if you've been watching the news or even scrolling on Instagram or Facebook, is the craziness that's going on in our world. Just this morning, everything stopped on the news in order to focus in on a raid that is currently happening at former statesman John Bolton's home and residence in Washington, D.C. The FBI is now raiding his home in the same way that the FBI raided our President Trump's home back in the day. But the difference between the two is that they gave Trump a lot of warning. You know, they let him know a few times they wanted to get these documents. They knew what documents he had. He kept saying, I don't have them. And so, but this time they didn't give Bolton any warning, at least not that we know of. And they raided his home. This is a classic authoritarian tactic. This is something that authoritarian governments do. We also have, just in the last week, in fact, just yesterday, the Trump administration put forward a list of the museums that they are now going to defund because they are, quote, too woke. In addition to that, we all know that our neighbors and our friends have been disappearing on the streets because of the torqued up immigration policy that has been exacted by this administration. These are all tactics that are used all the time by fascist or authoritarian governments. So I've invited Tihomir back to Kitchen Table Conversations and to this very first one on Substack in order, first of all, for us to understand what do we mean when we're talking about authoritarianism and fascism, and how does our faith figure into this new context that we find ourselves in? How should we, as people of faith, be moving through the world in this moment right now? How does our faith impact how we live and do and be in this moment right now? So, Tihomir, I want to start, first of all, by saying thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.
I'm glad to be back, and thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, I also wanted to say, y'all, Tihomir is on Substack, so you need to go over and subscribe to his channel and become a paid subscriber here at The Truth Is or on Freedom Road, both of which I have content coming out on a regular basis. So Freedom Road, The Truth Is, um, come and be a paid subscriber. That actually helps us to do the work that we do. So, Tihomir, can you share with us what is it that in your life, in your past, gives you a window into seeing this moment um, in a way that most Americans may be struggling to see?
Thank you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share. I want to keep within the title that you have given us, and Faith and Fascism, or Fascism and Faith. And I know you want to hear it from my background, my experience, because I was born in what used to be former Yugoslavia. You know, I say I'm from Croatia because the place I am from today is Croatia, a country. But it was in the former Yugoslavia, located then. And during the time of what people would popularly call communism, you know, we called it socialism to sound more appealing and attractive. And in our little introduction, I warned you in a way to say, you know, drawing any kind of parallel between my experience growing in Yugoslavian communism and what are we seeing being developed now is not the same thing. Actually, honestly saying, I am more concerned now by what I'm seeing here, because to me it looks more lethal and dangerous than whatever I have experienced in my lifetime growing in under the so-called communism of Yugoslavia. People might be shocked to hear this, although, you know, just quickly giving a kind of a background, this was communism, socialism ideologically, but I grew up in this country when country was opening up, separated itself from the influence of Russia. It understood that it needs to be open to the world because of tourism. We geographically, from Yugoslavia, now Croatia is located at a wonderful place. Tourism was very important. So this all shaped how this communism in Yugoslavia worked. And basically, I would call it, not everyone necessarily agree with me with this, that it turned into kind of benevolent kind of communism. So my childhood, honestly speaking, you know, I know that I was, as a Christian, sort of in some sense a second class citizen, but this was not so oppressive as the things we are seeing developing now here.
Yeah,
And
can I just interject real quick for just a quick second? Because I remember the Sarajevo
yeah,
Olympic Games. And I mean, I remember how beautiful and welcoming the society was and how diverse and ready to welcome the world it was. And that was in Yugoslavia. That was actually when it was Yugoslavia. 1980 or 1984?
1984 was the Winter Olympic Games in Sarajevo.
Right. And so in that time, in that era, the world was still like, hey, let's go to Sarajevo. There wasn't a sense that people are being erased and disappeared off the streets in Yugoslavia. And yet you're saying, look, that was our context. This is worse.
This is
It blows my
worse.
mind.
And this is why I don't want to dwell too much on that Yugoslavian experience, because really, I don't remember me growing in fear. I do not remember me growing fear. I knew my space. But generally speaking, I felt free. When I became a student, I traveled freely. I even studied in England, came from Yugoslavia to study in England, and I did not feel much different than many, maybe young people from some other European countries. But our problem was that somehow former Yugoslavia, call it dictatorship, benevolent, whatever it is, and especially under the leadership of this figure, his name was Tito, or nickname,
Tito, yes.
somehow he knew how to bring those different South Slavic ethnic groups together under the umbrella of brotherhood and unity. And we truly, most of us, truly really believe that that's what we were living, that we were living. To many of us at that time, it didn't really matter so much whether one is Croat or a Serb or a Bosniak or something else, till we reached the end of 80s,
Yeah.
and then we were coming into the beginning of the 90s, and then we came to a stage when we experienced war. I'm simplifying. You had Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks, not only Croats. Serbs, Croats, and Bosniaks fighting.
Right.
But the problem was, and I know some people will say that I'm simplifying it for the purpose of better understanding, is that it was not because at a time when most of the other Eastern European countries were changing from whatever model of communism they were following into whatever model of democracies, that we had a hard time to start to give up communism. That was not our problem. That was not what caused the war. The problem was that there were masterful national politicians across the spectrum from Yugoslavia who wanted to use the situation to their advantage. And I would say they resurrected old sins, old unfinished businesses from the Second World War to create fears so that we begin to fear each other. Croats fear Serbs, Serbs fear Croats. That's just the beginning. When you get to Bosnia, then you really got a big mess, and then you have Kosovo, Albanians, and all of this. So you have a potential for a big mess. So it was not that hard to bring then this place, which had an opportunity to move even more strongly into some new model of democracy. And what a powerful example it would be, because this was a big country. Instead of this, we were led to believe that we would do much better if we split and we take care of each other, of our own little countries, take care of this, than if we stay together. I'm not getting into all of these kind of things now, into details, but result of this was that we had a terrible war. By the way, I just want to say it very clearly that at that time, when just before war was starting, Croatia, Slovenia, and other republics separated quite legally from the rest of Yugoslavia, mainly from Serbia, because the constitution of Yugoslavia had a provision that should republic desire at some point to separate and become its own entity, it can, if this is the will of the people and if we had referendums. And we had referendums, and referendums decided that basically that's how Croatia became an independent state, because we had in 90 or 91, we had a referendum which overwhelmingly decided that Croatia was going to be an independent state. The same was with Slovenia. And then in a similar manner, it happened with Bosnia and then with Macedonia. So I'm just giving a quick overview because I don't want us to be bogged into this. What happened was then, and what really shaped me, first you have this war that opens your eyes in many ways about what's happening. And in some sense, even what fools we were in many ways. But then what really the most important thing in my shaping was what happened afterwards.
Mm.
I moved to Australia, but very quickly I moved back to Croatia because I was invited to lead this project, this reconciliation ministry initiative, how we want to call it, Renewing Our Minds, which I led for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it is this ministry, this initiative that reshaped me too, because this ministry initiative was born not just for Croatia. It was born to speak to the young leaders of that region, what used to be former Yugoslavia, to speak with some new, fresh message. We did not want to reconstruct Yugoslavia, that was not the idea,
Right.
but to bring young people across all of those divides. And there are a number of those divides. There are ethnic divides. This is a small region, but so much fragmented. Religious divides, because this is also the place where the Western Christianity, Eastern Christianity, and Islam are meeting together. So you have several lines of divisions that overlap, that come together in some sense, and this war has caused a new distrust, especially among the young people.
So where do you see parallels between that experience and what we're experiencing today?
Well, I'm coming to this right now. I'm coming to this
Okay.
because this Renewing Our Mind programs was meant to speak into our past and to speak with a new message that we need leaders who will be different from the leaders that brought us into those wars.
Mm.
And this is how the Rome was born. And here we are quickly coming to a place where things are coming together. During those war years, we had all the elements, or leading to the war, say the last 2-3 years, leading ahead of the wars, leading to war and throughout the war, we had so many things happening there that I am seeing, and I've been seeing here over the past 10 years in this country.
Okay.
And
Like-
I said a number of times this, that the only blessing for America is this, that it is so huge so that everyone is afraid to start a civil war. But if this country were smaller, it has all the elements in place that we had at the territory of the collapsing former Yugoslavia that led us to war. A lying, demonization of the enemy, of this other one.
Lying, you said?
Lying, constant lying.
Wow.
Demonizing the enemy.
Right.
Enemy is your neighbor there, not only the one across the border, because if you're Croat or a Serb and you live in the same village, the neighbor can be the one who lives in the next house.
Wow.
Next to you. Use of media for the purpose of lying. Creating or resurrecting mythologies, which many of them were false or
So-
half-truths.
Creating mythologies that actually uphold the dominating power's narrative.
Yeah, not only one, there were several there, but creating local mythologies, ethnic mythologies about how great we were in the past, how unjustly we are being treated, how we want to bring things ourselves to the place of when we were great. Picking a king from past 200-300 years, because in this region right there, things were over centuries shifting left and right, and it is always true that at some points maybe Serbs were dominant here for a while, but then there were Croats or Albanians, then it was shifting all over the place over the centuries. So anyone can pick up a king or a prince or someone 200, 300, 400 years ago and claim legitimacy about this and say, this was ours, this belongs to us.
Wow.
So this was very much alive. Victimization. It's all fault of our neighbors, not us. We have never done anything wrong. Only injustice we have suffered throughout the centuries.
And isn't that funny, because it kind of resonates with this line, this mythology that the Trump administration is trying to project, that America has always or had been great. And so as a result, because you're trying to put forward that narrative, you kind of have to squash the telling of the story of slavery, or you have to minimize it, right? So you have his people coming out and saying, well, slavery wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
what? Like that feels like one of those things that, how is that being questioned right now? But it is. And what I hear you saying is there's a reason why that's being questioned, because it leads to further enmity and the ability to tear a nation apart.
Exactly. And this is the meeting point. You were expecting me to come to this point where we are meeting. How does my situation then in any way resembles the one here? We might have some different stories, but the principles behind,
Yeah.
principles of division, dividing, putting yourself to the position on the top, demonizing others. So when you dehumanize and demonize others, you can do whatever you want with this other. We had all of those elements in those leading, and that's the tricky thing. You have a period that leads to the first spark. You have, I would say in our case, we had it like for 2-3 years intensely leading. You constantly believe, okay, we will avoid the catastrophe. This is going to be resolved somehow. But when I look at this back now, I can see how the climate was being developed till we reached the point of no return.
Wow. When did that point come? Like, when did you know you had reached the point of no return? What was that point for Yugoslavia?
That was the summer of 91. That was the summer and also 91 when we reached the point of no return.
What was the point?
Well, that was the point when basically the open conflict started in Croatia between Serbs and Croats. A few months later, it moved to Bosnia. That was the point. It was that I remember I was in England. It was August 91. I was attending a media seminar, and I still left in a no-war situation. And I'm from England following the news, seeing how, starting with Slovenia, that's where it started, but it was short for just a week, And I'm seeing the pictures and images that I never believe I would see, how explosions, how basically the scenes that really kind of look like a war. And I'm coming back in this kind of situation only to see how basically there is an explosion of war in Croatia.
Yeah.
And you know what? People see that those kind of things develop for too long. Once you have crossing the edge, and this is, I think, important, once you see that the line of no return has been crossed, once you see the blood has been spilled, once you see, then things develop so fast that 2 weeks later, you feel that you have always been in war.
Wow.
It doesn't gradually take, I don't know, months or whatever. Within few days, it escalates to the point that you feel like it has always been like this.
Wow.
And to me, this is a warning for this country.
Wow. I mean, I'm honestly a little bit speechless because that's very, very scary.
I hope it won't.
When you spoke to us back, when the kitchen table conversation was on Instagram, you gave us that warning. You said, look, we have all the signs, like what's happening here is what happened to us, and we need to take a warning. But it's even worse now. I mean, like way worse now.
Yeah.
And how much closer do you think we are to that point of no return?
I don't know. I'm concerned. I'll tell you why. Because it seems that all the institutions, and America has historically, despite all its sins, like racism and all of this, we can talk about this, but nevertheless, on another level, America has been an example to the world for such a long time, what democracy really looks like and how it operates, and in its heart, how really separation of church and state functions really ideally, that it's not abused, that neither religious side abuses the state side, or state side is abusing the religious side. So, despite of all of the sins, America was nevertheless a model of democracy to the world. All of this is gone because all the institutions that form, and there are three levels or three, however you call this, of institutions here that are guarding, protecting democracy in this country, all of them are dysfunctional.
Yeah.
President is doing with his brotherhood whatever he wants. He's not accountable to anyone. Doesn't matter what occasionally maybe even the Supreme Court would dare to say something or some other courts. He nevertheless laughs and he does his own thing. We have another level, and this is when you talk about Congress, when you talk about Senate, whatever, which should be really balanced to the misbehavior of the presidents. You have situation paralyzed there, thanks to Republicans there, who are puppets, who are in bed with Donald Trump. So here you have a clinch position, and the only hope that you have is the Supreme Court.
And that's
and this is
far
crumbling.
less of a hope nowadays.
This is crumbling. At one moment, they will give us a hope by certain decisions, and the next one, basically, it mocks everything, And when you have this gone, and you still have a constitution that's beautiful, but not functional because there is no one to implement it. That's why I'm worried that I don't honestly know, have we already crossed the line of no return, or if we haven't, that we are right at the edge of it.
So in that context that you just drew for us, sketched for us, how does our faith walk faithfully in that context? What does it demand of us?
Can I interject something here, which I believe immediately leads to this, because I think there is an important element here needed related to my experience. And you were with us at what we call Rome gathering a number of years ago, and this Rome really shaped me, because this Rome came forward to basically teach young people, regardless of who they are, and we deliberate about getting them across all of these divides, Serbs, Croats, Bosniaks, Albanians, and became international, really. At the end, we had young people coming from 60 countries to our programs. Everything was in English, But the purpose was, initially, why we started it, was to bring them across those divides, future leaders, emerging leaders, and to teach them how to be a different kind of leader. How to be a different kind of leader. How to be a leader who does not live for power grabbing, just to think about himself or herself, but how in this small region, you as a future leader, how you are going to serve your country, whatever municipality, whatever, but how also you are going to be a women or men of peace and reconciliation. Because if we don't do this in a small region, tomorrow we are going to be in the same trouble. And we quickly developed a model that I think made the difference. It truly turned this ministry into transformative ministry. And we worked very heavily on developing friendship, genuine, lasting friendships. The other thing was we worked very seriously about analyzing what divides us, how we got here, and why are we hurting. This was always, that's why it lasted so long. How do we go about this? How do we reconcile? How do we forgive? And then we move to the leadership part. What does this mean now for you as a leader, emerging leader? How are you going to lead in this context? And then the another part, which actually was the platform for everything, is person of Jesus as a model of a true and genuine leader we need. And for us who are Christians,
it's worth actually saying that you had people who were not Christians
Yeah.
that participated in renewing our minds.
Yeah.
How did that, how did they actually ask the question about their faith in that context?
Well, I could tell you we had less problems with Muslims than with Christians sometimes, because I think we were very truthful to the historic Christianity. But what we understood was we are not church, and we are not here to preach and teach and convert and evangelize. And this is not an opportunity to trick anyone who is not a Christian into Christianity. But let's offer Jesus, because for us who
As a
Christians,
model. As a model.
for us as Christians who probably we are clear about this, that the same Jesus who is the Lord and the Savior is also the real and true model of genuine, true humanity. So this was our emphasis, basically saying we are not here to convert you, but we are going to offer you a model of a true and genuine leader who in himself identifies, embodies everything we need as leaders and human beings. Talk about peace. He is the one. Talk about reconciliation. He's the one. Talk about any kind of principles, empathy. He's the one to go to. And we can go through whatever we want, which really formats a genuine humanity. We have it in him. So look at him. How does this thing work in his life? And believe me, when you go to the Gospels are so contemporary. Take Samaritan woman, for example.
A lot of us.
Yeah, you just put the other names in their stories. You can put Serbs, Croats, or you can put whites and blacks, and you will learn a lot from Jesus about reconciliation, about forgiving, about accepting, embracing, about empathy. That's what we did. And it worked, I would say, perfectly. It did work. That's why I'm saying we had a number of young Muslim intellectuals with us, and I don't remember a single case that we had ever problem with them. But we did have sometimes with some evangelicals who thought we are diluting the gospel, Look at the opportunity now to convert them all. We are diluting because they had this.
I know. I was there. I remember it.
So this is important background which shaped me, which shaped those leaders. And how does this fit into this picture? For example, when Donald Trump was to become a president, he nominated himself. And when we realized, oh, goodness me, that's not a joke, I immediately started expressing my concern about that. And I got in trouble because of this, honestly, with some people. But for me, before we start dealing with the question, how do we go about this now? For me, it was important because to me, him appearing on the scene suddenly as a new model of leadership was alarming. And I did not want my friends who have been trained through my ministry to get an idea that he is now to be followed, who is everything opposite to Jesus and this kind of model, who is an insult when it comes to the leadership of Jesus.
So, Tihomir, but when we talk about today, let's take it to today, and we ask the question of when we see people marching in the streets today against the big, quote, beautiful bill, or against the disappearances, or not having a king. We don't have kings here in the United States, right? When we, as people of faith, see these demonstrations or actions, how does our faith interact with those demonstrations of resistance? Now, I know how I am, wired, and also how I've been trained to engage it. But my training has not been in the midst of an authoritarian rule. It hasn't been in the midst of fascist rule, or, that hasn't been my context. Although I will say the context of the civil rights movement and the context of the abolitionist movement were both fascist contexts. They were both authoritarian contexts for those who were resisting. So they had no recourse under law. What the authorities said went. it was not a king per se, but it was not the rule of law. And as a result, my ancestors who fought both in the civil rights movement and in abolition, they were not protected. So we have a measure of something to hearken back to, but as a collective in the United States, we really don't. That has not been our context. So I want to know, how do we as Christians today actually interact with these movements of resistance that are rising up around us? Should we be joining them? Should we be starting our own thing? Should we be having prayer meetings, or how do we engage
I think we are now getting to the heart
in
of the matter.
fascist context?
Yeah, because I'm so much upset, or I'm using the word, I'm not exact. I'm so much upset. Here on one end, we have the so-called MAGA Christianity. We have Christian nationalists.
Right.
And tragically, you can't expect more from them than what we are getting. And that's not the model of Christianity. That's insult to Christianity. I truly don't know even whether one should even call it Christianity anymore. So you have this block of people that actually have made, because Trump didn't happen in a vacuum. So basically, 80% of white Christians made Trump to be Trump, okay? Make him to be king. So that's one group. And you know what upsets me is not them, because they are who they are. What upsets me is the other, I don't know whether it's half, but definitely sizable segment of those who are not necessarily Trumpians openly or whatever.
It's the people that Dr. MLK named as that moderate middle.
Yeah. And here we are getting to what made it possible we can do. It upsets me. I'm not going to name it. I am part of a very beautiful church here, big church in Houston. But and maybe some of them are going to listen to this and I will regret it. Wonderful people, wonderful ministries, wonderful services for people who need food and all of these kind of things. But then you get to the church, and you have a church service, and you have a technically wonderful sermon, who in some other time and circumstances would be wonderful sermon. And there comes a minister uses illustration which call for illustrations out of the situation right now. When they call, instead of taking some 30, 50 years ago from I don't know where or some other country, they call to use the illustration from the streets of America where people are being hunted. And there is not even a mentioning of anything like this, but some sterile cosmetic illustrations that really would not hurt, offend, or invoke any action in anyone, some kind of childish illustrations, or even, among the popular celebrities, people in sport and how they follow the Lord and this kind of, it's all beautiful, it didn't offend me 3, 4, 5 years ago. But when I'm hearing this kind of now things, and then there is not a single reference to anything that is happening here. And then when we have this communal prayer of confession, which are so general and about nothing, forgive us for this and this and this and this, but nothing invoking in you, so that you will say, okay, when I leave this church, I need to change my direction here. And this confessional prayer, only finish with this, and we also pray for peace, I'm offended. Because I'm asking myself, people, do you see what is happening here? Are you
you're into this. We just over the last 2 weeks watched the Texas legislature, the state legislature, do a full-on fascist takeover of the districts in Texas, actually creating a gerrymander halfway through the 10-year
But in my beautiful church, no one is going to mention this.
And literally throughout, literally disenfranchised 2 separate Black legislators, Black representatives, House representatives, no longer have a district because of the work of that state house, and nobody's mentioning it in church. That's what I hear you saying, is that there's no connection between Jesus and public life. What's happening in our lives?
That is the problem. And there is this, I would say, a large segment of American Christianity that is like that. As long as it doesn't bother me, just leave me with my church and with my TV shows and entertainment. And as long as I'm not affected, I'm not seeing it. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to address it. I can't do anything anyway. I heard this kind of, what can I do? So this attitude doesn't help. It actually, I would say, makes this side of American Christianity complicit for what's happening now. In some way, just like the other militant side, which are cheering for Donald Trump all the time. They're using church as his platform for everything and anything. So this is my concern. This is my concern. I am encouraged. I hope it's not an illusion, because I'm seeing that the voices are being created over the last several months. More and more Christians are kind of speaking publicly out. And I'm just thinking, is this just because I'm on Substack and this is here happening? Or is this really happening? Because sometimes I ask myself, where have you been until several months ago? Mm-hmm. And I don't know, whatever it is, if it's real, may the Lord bless it and may the number of people grow. And going to your question, I think there are several things that we as Christians who actually are not blinding ourselves, who are seeing what is happening and who are, I would say, rightfully alarmed. Mm-hmm. Rightfully alarmed, because I think something is wrong if we are not. This is not business as usual anymore. There are several things. You started with the protests. My view is that it is a place for Christians to protest, but I have to admit, I only support non-violent protests.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
And you too. So I want to be clear. I don't want anyone quote me and say, "Oh, look at this man, he's supporting violence." No, I am not.
You get it.
But to be out, to stand for what is right, to be part of a group of people to say this is not how it should go. Mm-hmm. I think that this is one of the ways that Christians in this country should be active. Mm-hmm. So I'm in full support of what you are doing, and also with your question, my answer is affirmative. Mm-hmm. But I think there are probably a few more things that could.
Okay, so what else? That's great.
Also done.
So join the protests. Get out there. Be a part of it. Add your body to the number. Yeah. Your voice to the cry. Okay.
The other thing is, I think what we are doing right now. It might look that it's little. It's nothing. And some of you have even a larger circle of influence, some less, I'm learning to get into this sphere even more. But I think to have voices that are using now alternative media and speaking from the platform of Christianity that I believe is truly Christianity, based on the person of Jesus, on a platform of him teaching us how to embrace and stand for those who are vulnerable. And this is so important, and I don't want to detract from what I'm saying, but to me, it shocks me, and that's why we need to be speaking, is this. On one hand, you have those militant Christians, Christian nationalists, dominionists, New Apostolic Reformation, hope no one is offended, or whatever, those who want to now take the opportunity and take in the name of Jesus to control over this country. And they are forgetting that the opposite of what we ought to be like Christian is not only to tell others how they should be living, but that we need to actually be, according to Matthew chapter 25, where Jesus gives this picture about two groups of people on a judgment day. And he says, when whenever you did or didn't do this to the least of these, you did it or didn't do to me. And he goes through the whole list of people who are disadvantaged, who are in trouble. And today he would probably add another 20 things there. They don't see that. They're blind about things. They don't see that as important. They don't see they're pro-life in only one tiny area. But
They're
there is
just
such a
not pro-life,
huge.
pro-birth.
How can you be? So I know I'm carried away, but how can one be? And this is what is insulting. They are defending. This leadership is defending Christianity as no one else. They claim. They have instituted I don't know how many bodies to perfect religious freedom, as if religious freedom is being discovered with Donald Trump, And they are putting people in charge, and they are putting crosses that you see them from the airplane, You need to know that they are religious. You need to know that they're born-again Christians, whatever it is. But those same people are the instruments and the creators of the laws right now and practices that go against people. And you have those people who will, at one level, brag about being born again, about their love for the Lord Jesus, and would ask you, are you repented? Have you given your heart to Jesus? But those same people are behind what is happening on our streets when those masked men in the herds of 20 or 30 of them attacking one person like wolves, savages. They are thinking this is how it should be, sending to know what kind of gulags. So there is this kind of tension, and I think we who know better should make our voices heard as long as we can.
So
Because
I want to ask you another question, and then we're going to wrap it up because we have been going now for almost an hour, and it's so exciting that we've had our first kitchen table conversation.
Sorry for being carried away.
No, not at all. No. This is not about carried away. This is just, you can only go for so long.
Yeah.
So I want to ask you, in terms of our faith.
Yeah.
And pastors in particular, because I think what you're really putting your finger on is the silence of churches to speak out in moments, pastors, leaders of churches to speak out in moments of ethical clarity, actually. Like the ethics of this moment are more clear than they have ever been. I mean, not since the Civil War have the ethics been so clear, or maybe even you don't have to go back that far. You could really say the ethics haven't been this clear since before the Civil Rights Act, right? Since Jim Crow, that was clear. We're here now. We're back. Jim Crow is back. It's not coming. It's here. It's sitting in my kitchen. It is sitting here. And so it has been clarified. But in the face of clarity, people are still choosing silence, and also both-andism. They're choosing this, well, but nobody's perfect, or they're choosing this, well, and I've heard this a lot. I actually wrote about this about a month ago. They're choosing this line of, well, but my people are not ready. They're not ready to hear the truth. And my word to them is, well, when are you going to make them ready? You're the leader. Like, your job as a leader is to lead them into truth and goodness and beauty.
Yeah.
Truth and goodness and beauty. If you are not leading them into truth and goodness and beauty, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing? Are you waiting for them to lead you to the place where you're able to speak on truth, beauty, and goodness? And in an era when you have encroaching lies, evil, and desolation.
Yeah.
This is what's encroaching on this era. And in that context, pastors' mouths are silent about truth, beauty, and goodness.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm experiencing. That's what I see. And I think what I'd like to hear you talk about is, what does it look like to choose Jesus, to choose truth, beauty, and goodness in the context of economic threat, because that's the number one reason why they stay silent. They're worried about people leaving. They're worried about the tithes drying up because the tithes pay their paycheck. So what does it look like for them to count the cost in these days?
I don't know really for the whole nation because I think it has to start with us who know that. And I'm even asking myself, am I brave enough? It's easier to talk than to do the things. And who know that actually Christian faith manifest towards others is very much relational. It's not about which 10 or 20 points you believe so much as relational. How do you love? Yeah. That we need to, I would say, by the grace of God, take a courage and start being deliberately living death wherever the opportunity is around us. Whether this is a protest or whether it's to make a statement or whether to be for someone. Start with this because I don't think that simply with so many other Christians, this is just going to dawn on them somehow, suddenly overnight. Start with this, with small steps. Just to give you maybe quickly 2 illustrations. Because I'm asking those questions myself constantly and I'm feeling inadequate, honestly. And I don't also be just a person who just talks and writes about those things. So what do I do beyond that? So if I can just quickly give you 2 illustrations. Pastor, a friend of mine from another state here in this country, for example, in the form of some mentoring or counseling or like a friend or whatever. I know that we're on the same page, but I know it's hard when you really have a problem with your church. And his church is, these are Trumpian churches, sorry to say, So one of the elders in one of the churches that he's pastoring comes to him and says, Pastor, I think that those 3 church cleaners, that they are illegal immigrants. You should go and report them.
Oh, wow.
And you know what kind of war this creates? It creates, my friend, not because he wants to do it, but he sees all the potential troubles and conflicts in the church if he doesn't or whatever it is. So we are talking and he says, what would you do? What would you do if you were in such a situation? I said, I'm glad I'm not pastoring a church, so I'm not. But knowing myself, I know, first of all, he did say, I don't think I can do this because the gospel is not teaching me that. But then you know the answer. But you know what Romans says? We need to be obedient to all authorities. And so this was left hanging, and he did not, God forbid, he didn't report anything, but the elder.
I want to go back because you said, what Romans says.
Yeah, you know what I use the excuse.
I want to correct that because it doesn't say be obedient to all authorities. Yeah. It says do not resist the authorities.
I know, but their argument was that he should do it because Paul said so,
Right,
but
which
anyway,
is wrong.
He didn't want to do it, but he wanted to speak with me, and he didn't do it. And he says, what do I do? What do you think? What would you do in this situation? I said, you did the right thing that you said. I cannot do it because this is not in a tune. My responsibility is not to be reporting people or throwing them out of the church. If I can help, I'm not going to unhelp in any way. And he says, but what would you do? Because there can be a line of problems. This elder could cause me problems now, can see me as a problem. I said, knowing myself, I would probably come to the point where I would rather resign from that church if it would give me a hell than to succumb and do what I totally know would be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So if we can encourage each other along those lines.
Mm-hmm. And I would also just say, why not? Hey, look, why not just pick out the Bible and have a little Bible study with your elders and your leaders about the moment that Abram and Sarai entered Egypt. And Abram told Sarai to lie, which is one of the big 10. Don't do that. But Abram said, lie and say that you're my sister, because the law that Pharaoh has put in place at this point says that if you're my wife, he will kill me. So in order to avoid death, let's twist ourselves, and I should say that you're my sister. Well, they did that, and there were huge costs for that, as in Abram got a lot of good stuff. Like, he got concubines and wives, and he got lands, and he got oxen, and he made out like a little bandit. But Sarai got raped. Sarai got brought into the concubines. Sarah had no ability to say no. And so she got brought into the concubine and was raped repeatedly. And then finally, the word comes down to Pharaoh, wait a minute, he's not her brother, he's his wife, and God is angry. Pharaoh gets the word that God is angry, and Pharaoh's like, why did you do this to me? Why did you lie? And Pharaoh, he says, well, because your law said that you would kill me if I didn't lie. In the end, who did God exact judgment against? Was it Abram for lying at the border, or was it Pharaoh for exacting a law that caused people to have to lie? It was Pharaoh. Pharaoh was judged. In the end, Pharaoh got basically like God opened a can of whoop ass on him because he had unjust laws. And God did nothing, said nothing to the reality that Abram broke one of the 10 commandments, and God never even mentioned it. I think because God understands that when systems and structures enact unjust laws, people sometimes, the ethics in that moment is different than for the ethics of someone who is not oppressed in that moment. It requires a different ethical calculation. And so that, I think, is what immigrants encounter at our border. They encounter unjust laws that are already in place that make it impossible for people to come in the legal way. And yet they are suffering. They are under threat of violence and death in their own home countries, and they are running for their lives. So they are making an Abrams calculation. And I do not believe that God would call them, hold them accountable in the same way that God holds Pharaoh accountable. And that makes really, we in a democracy are Pharaoh. We are the ones who are responsible for our laws. We allow them to happen. So our work then is to change the laws, right? Our work then is to call our legislators and tell them we have unjust laws. It is not to turn over Abram to the authorities.
I completely agree. And maybe another thing that is possible, maybe even in the audience that is listening right now, I will listen later, because we feel that we are in minority, and you feel we can't do much. Little things like sending a letter.
I have to say, my dog, I'm sure you can hear my dog in the background. My mom is coming in.
Yeah.
So my dog is going crazy.
Yeah. I can hear the dog. I can hear the dog. I don't know whether you heard what I said.
I didn't. What did you say? And then we'll
I said another apparently little thing, which I tried, not get into details, is to write a pastor of your church and kindly ask a question: how come that in my church there is never a reference to the injustices what that are taking place right now and the way the society is going rapidly. And do you think maybe something can be done so that my church in some way also sort of calls the leaders to account and guides the church also how to navigate through this instead of acting as if really nothing is happening, it's business as usual, or it's just a little bit of something which is going to sort itself somehow sooner or later. So I'm just saying it because I did this only once so far when it comes to this. I sent actually, there was a pastor who listened to my podcast, and I think he recognized that I'm speaking in some way even to him. So he gave me opportunity to actually write to him an email. So we exchanged a couple of emails, pretty long ones.
That's really great. Wow.
Yeah.
See, so there is always something we can do. I just want to say thank you so much, Tihomir, for being with us today, for sharing with us, first of all, the parallels. I think some of the big takeaways that I'm going to take away from this time is that we are closer to that point of no return than we might want to think. And so in that way, we need to be prepared. Be prepared, and also be preparing our people to respond in just ways once that line is crossed, if it hasn't already been crossed. And one of the ways that we can do that is by having the conversations. I want to actually just add that as one of the tips. We can have these conversations now in our churches, in our communities, online with our communities, asking them to take a look at the person of Jesus. What would he do? That's a really great question, just even as an ethical model for us to understand what would he do. What does Jesus do when confronted with people who are breaking law and yet are among the least of these, among the immigrants, the hungry, the thirsty, people like the bleeding woman who broke the law to come in and touch him, to come in, crawl through the crowd. And she was supposed to be on the outskirts of the city. Like with people like the demoniac, and others. So what do we see in the person of Jesus? I love how you lifted him up, in order to understand what our ethic, how we should be interacting with our neighbors in these times. And then I want to also just say, Tihomir, that while you say you only speak, but the time now is action. I actually think that under fascism, speaking is action.
Yeah. And
Right?
it can be
Speaking, it can get you thrown in jail.
it can be very dangerous action, actually, very soon.
Yes. So speaking is action in this moment. So at the very least, start with the conversations. Join the masses when they come on, when they go onto the streets. Add your body and your voice to the number. And let your legislators know you are not down for this. Texas, let your legislators know you are not down for this. Florida, let your legislators know you are not down for this. New York, and also New Jersey, and all the places that we see people being disappeared, DC, out of our communities. You are not down for this. All right. So there's so much more to be said, but we
Yeah.
have actually already gone an hour. So let's wrap it up. And just say that next Friday we will not be here because it'll be Labor Day weekend. And instead we'll be coming back the week of September 1st on that Friday. And the time still has to be determined. I'm actually thinking maybe we'll do it later in the day and we'll go back to that later in the day time. Because Fridays are kind of that time. People are not wanting to get up and have this conversation in the morning. But come back and also subscribe. Subscribe to The Truth Is and to Freedom Road on Substack. Become a paid subscriber. If you are already a free subscriber, upgrade. You know what I mean? We're actually going to be putting out a lot of offerings in this time, and not the least of which is going to be a book study that will start on September 1st. We have a book study of Fortune, Family Story is Resistance. It's going to be a 10-week deal, 10 weeks, one chapter per week. We're going to be going through the book Fortune, my book that was released in 2022, and looking at how I researched my family. Because in light of the dismantling of public memory by the taking down of monuments and also the defunding of our museums, our bodies become the evidence of American history. Our DNA, our family stories are the evidence. So join us for the Fortune book study, which will be beginning on September 1st. It'll be taking place every Monday night at 7 p.m. Live. And so please join us. All right. We'll talk with you guys later. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Tihomir.
And thank you for giving me this opportunity again.
Absolutely, for coming and spending an hour with us.
Sorry,
Thank you.
Sorry, I overdid it, but maybe for a good reason.
Did not overdo it. You were fabulous. Thank you, guys. We'll see you. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yes.
God bless.
God bless. Okay.